Video blog number 3, and I did the last couple last week and haven't really done much reading since then. But I've just read an article on Moltmann. I went to that article because I haven't got to the library yet, and I've read a lot of Trinitarian work by Moltmann before and wrote a critique of his Staurocentric Trinitarianism for my undergraduate degree. And how he understands the cross as a Trinitarian event. When I wrote that piece of work, I was very critical of Moltmann. Like I said in the last video, it didn't seem to me like the doctrine of the Trinity should be pressed into service or overly relied upon to provide some sort of social program. And yeah, we can get that kind of stuff from the Bible anyway. But I've been reading this article on Moltmann's theology. It was called Moltmann and the Anti-Monotheism Movement by Otto Randall, and it was published in 2001 in the International Journal of Systematic Theology. And he points out a number of problems with Moltmann's view. One of the most significant things that he picked up on, I thought, was how Moltmann treats relationality, or what does he say, communion, perichoresis even, as constituting an ontological unity in God. And I think that is false. Relationality or perichoresis seems rather, what's the word I'm looking for? Impotent? I'm not sure about that. But anyway, I didn't think perichoresis provided enough. So by perichoresis, I mean mutual indwelling. I didn't think that provided enough for ontological unity. I didn't think that love or the mutual love of Father, Son and Holy Spirit provided a robust enough account of how those three persons are a unity. And Randall said this actually. He says, perichoresis may not be used to deny the substantial numerical unity of God. Perichoresis presupposes that numerical identity. And I think he's right that perichoresis, rather than providing an account or justifying or providing a way of unifying the three persons, presupposes that there's something ontological undergirding that relationality. Those people aren't made one by their love for each other. They're made one in their sharing of one substance. As traditional Trinitarianism has put forward, God is one substance, one being in three persons, not one being who is also somehow three beings, or one person who is somehow three persons, but is one being in three persons. And I think if we deny that substantial unity and just go for a relational unity, a unity of perichoresis, then I don't think we've done enough to provide a robust account of the unity of the divine persons. In other words, Moltmann ends up being a tritheist, which is what a lot of social Trinitarians are criticised for, tritheism. Now, what's next? Yeah, the other thing that I found quite difficult when reading Moltmann previously, and the thing that Randall picked up on in his article, is unusual terminology for certain points of view. So Moltmann talks about how he wants to deny monotheism and embrace Trinitarianism. And that's clearly a false dichotomy, I would have thought, because Christians are monotheists and Trinitarians. He seems to imply that monotheism implies monism. So the idea that God is just kind of a pure unity, like one person. But that's clearly not true, because there are a whole bunch of monotheist Trinitarians, people who deny social Trinitarianism, deny monism, but are still committed to this idea of one God in three persons. And by social Trinitarianism, there are a number of things that are meant by that. I think most importantly is the idea that God is a community, or at least in terms of methodology, a social Trinitarian will start with the threeness of God and move to trying to understand how they are unified, whereas a Latin Trinitarian or antisocial Trinitarian will try and begin with the oneness and then make sense of the threeness. I think it's a difference in starting points. But of course, social Trinitarianism has also been pressed into that idea of providing a social program. So that's a corollary of social Trinitarianism. It doesn't necessarily follow. So you could still be a social Trinitarian for philosophical reasons, but then not think that certain political or ethical things follow from that. So I'm quite persuaded by the model put forward by William Lane Craig and J.P. Moreland, when they put forward a social model, i.e. a model that begins with the threeness and makes sense of the oneness of God in a certain way, in a substantial way, not one of perichoresis, but that denies the kind of social implications of a doctrine of the Trinity, or at least says that it would be unwise to press the doctrine of the Trinity that far. And why should we do so anyway? So there are a couple of things there. Moltmann's failure to properly account for unity, some odd terminology, and I found with a lot of German theologians that they're not particularly clear when it comes to explaining themselves. I'm not saying that all German theologians are unclear. It just seems to be the trend. And I think finally it's important to take into account these kind of philosophical, cosmological, political and ethical factors involved in what Moltmann's trying to do. Unfortunately, I don't think it can be taken in the kind of direction that Moltmann wants to take it. We're already at 8 minutes. It's pretty hefty. One final thing. Moltmann adopts a slogan, I think drawn from Bonhoeffer, that God's act is God's being, and that doesn't sound too dissimilar from Rahner's rule, where he says the immanent Trinity is the economic Trinity, and the economic Trinity is the immanent Trinity. And this idea that who God is almost only revealed in what God does. I need to research that a bit more, because it's fundamental clearly to how Moltmann and others go about developing their Trinitarianism. So there we go, Rahner's rule, threeness and oneness, and how do we account for ontological unity, and being clear with our terminology, I guess, are the lessons from this little article. I'll definitely have to spend more time reading Moltmann in my research, because he is one of the big names in social Trinitarianism, and he'd be worth paying a bit more attention to. He's mentioned in McCall's book, so I'll have to read that chapter. And I'll have to get to the library and get out some proper books, and then I can get a bit more of a foundation in where I want to go next. Look out for part 4.